All right, everybody. Well, welcome to another Tuesday 8 o'clock showing. I'm Raul Reyes. I'm your host for the next 1 hour. To say that the world is falling apart under Democrat leadership is the biggest understatement ever. And so, look, we've got a guest tonight. Before I bring him on, I just want to chat about a few things. The economy is in the tank. It looks like we're headed to a recession, maybe even a depression sometime in 23. Everybody's predicting that. You can thank Democrats for that. The border continues to be a mess. We're going to pay the price for allowing a lot of illegal aliens coming into this country without any stop check here on the border. I think everybody is trying to do everything they can. And of course, what we do on this show is we literally provide the truth and a lot of facts so you can see what's really happening. But under Democrat leadership, we've done a complete 180 in the last 2.5 years, especially since Joe Biden took over. Economy's a mess, the border's a mess. Uh, Elections across the U.S., not a lot of people are trusting those. We are coming up on an election here, November the 8th. And one of the things that intrigues me and why I'm bringing on my good friend here, Joseph Vargas, on board here in a little bit is, I keep hearing that Hispanics are leaving the Democrat Party. They're leaving the Democrat Party. Well, we've been seeing that since 2016 when Donald Trump took the office of president, and then of course in 2020 when in large droves they voted for him. The question becomes, are they going to vote again in November? And the reason I start off with Democrats have ruined everything is, look, folks, uh, Hispanics are just, they're Texans and they're Americans like everybody else. We're going to have that conversation. I don't, you know, buy into the notion that we ought to segregate people by class. That's not what we're trying to do here. But the topic in hand is, why do Hispanics still vote Democrat? Are they going to vote Democrat this November? And what I see is a lot of polls that are talking about how Republicans have shifted the number of people that who prefer Congress to be under Democrat or Republican charge. And so, for instance, if you look at the polls, on average, 52 to 54% of Hispanics still prefer Democrats to be in charge of Congress. You have to ask yourself why. What Republicans and conservatives, and what I would tell you is that's a 20-point shift from 72, 74% a few years back, where 72, 74% of Hispanics wanted or preferred Congress to be under Democrat rule. Well, fast forward to a terrible economy, open borders, and this wokeism that has just plagued our schools, our jobs. You have to have the vax if you're going to actually work for the government now, and on and on and on. We, by the way, are on the brink, and they're not talking a whole lot about this, but World War III is, it's peeking its ugly head out there with Ukraine and Russia. And the hypocrisy that is the Biden administration, as they proclaimed that when Donald Trump took office, heck, he could have been any Republican, folks, and they would have said they were incompetent, no aptitude to run the presidency position, and that they would get us into a world war. Well, there was no skirmishes or wars during Donald Trump, but now we find ourselves on the brink of all that. So this is what the left has done to America. We literally are living a hell. And we have so many people in America now we can't account for. Human trafficking, sex trafficking, and fentanyl in our schools is absolutely a disaster. But we always go back to, I keep hearing, Hispanics are going to vote in large numbers in November. I have a different take, as we always try to provide different angles here. Does not make me anti-Republican, doesn't make me pro-Democrat. What it makes me is just an observer of what's happening out there, so that we can actually look at things and learn from them and try to get as many people under the conservative canopy as, because right now, let me tell you something, folks. If a non-political person goes to vote, they still think that Donald Trump policies are in play with the Republican Party. Sure, we have a lot of Trumpians still in Congress and some working for the government, but in large part, what we have is this different Republican, like a Mitch McConnell, a Liz Cheney, who got thrown out here locally, a Tony Gonzalez, even Myra Flores down there, who won her special election. Some of these folks are pro-amnesty, globalists still, and that's not what we've all signed up for. So with all that in mind, I want to introduce a good friend of mine. I met Joseph back. Joseph Vargas is, founder of Keep Texas Red. I want to just briefly read his biography. He's originally from San Jose, California, which, by the way, I have family out there as well. He attended schools out there. He does have a BBA in management. And Joseph, for 20 plus years, has been a consultant, um, to public figures, musical artists. I'm going to have to find out about that, and political candidates. He's served as keynote speaker to a lot of different forums and meetings. I met him because he did a Keep It Red forum in Valverde County, which is Del Rio, Texas, while I was running for Congress. And if you've never seen his podcast, he also does interviews with folks like Don Huffines, Alan West, you name it, they've probably been on the Joseph Vargas Keep Texas Red podcast, and they're great interviews. So if you can get up to his website, do that, and we'll share that here once we get going with Joseph. So with that said, let me introduce to you my good friend, founder and vice president of the Juan Seguin Society, which we're going to talk about as well. Author of the Democrat Modus Operandi, and he's going to explain that to us as well. Joseph Vargas.
Raul, thank you for inviting me. It's good to be on.
Excellent, Joseph. How are you tonight?
Doing wonderful and happy to be on your show.
Good. Hey, listen. So I started this with, and you and I have talked a few times on this. A little tickler of a lot of people when I was on the campaign, and I ran two campaigns. And even so, when I'm out in the forums like the Republican women's groups or even just Republican Party groups, the question everybody asks is why do Hispanics, why have they voted Democrat? And I'll give you this as sort of to let you answer here. But in 2020, what I tell folks, even when Donald Trump in large numbers in South Texas brought in a large Hispanic population to vote for him, people like Henry Cuellar, the Democrat congressman, kept his job. Vicente Gonzalez kept his job, and every congressman in the southern border kept his job, because guess what? They still voted Democrat for those level of elected positions. Now that said, we're coming up on November, and you and I have discussed this, and we have different takes, I think. But first, let's answer the question. Tell me, what do you think is the reason that Hispanics have forever voted Democrat, even after Ronald Reagan in the 80s sort of did this transition, and his second election was a landslide where he won just about every electoral vote. I think it was he was shy three or six votes in Vermont somewhere. What's your take on that? Why do Hispanics vote Democrat in large numbers?
I think, first of all, there's 2 points to that. First of all, you got to understand that the culture. Most Hispanics, being from either Mexico or South America, those are very socialist countries. They have a lot of socialist programs. All the candidates in Mexico and South America, they always run on one thing only, and it's never on defending your freedom or defending any type of capitalism or any type of freedom for them. So they always run on, if you vote for me, I'm going to give you this. So a lot of them, they come with that mentality that it's like, it's the government's duty to give me something. So when they come to the United States, even the generations, they know, and they always expect that it's a government's responsibility and their duty to provide for them, whether it be housing, whether it be health insurance, whether it be education. So they already have, it's a cultural thing in part. Second of all, the Democrats have done an outstanding job at using the emotion factor that I always talk about in my trainings about the behavior part of it, about pretty much just brainwashing them that Republicans are racist and that they have to vote Democrat. So those are the two factors. The cultural one, where I think the majority of Hispanics, especially a lot of people from Mexico, they have that tendency that it's a government's responsibility to provide for them.
Well, and speaking of culture, I remember, and I don't know if it was from you or somewhere, but we have quinceañeras in the Mexican culture in Texas. And I remember somebody saying that the Democrats had, provided a program whereby they would pay for the quinceañera pictures. And part of it is that you would bring your whole family as part of, they would gift you, because look, whenever you, for folks who know what a quinceañera is, those are, it's kind of a debutante sweet 16. And it turns into a large dance and a large gathering of a lot of people, and they like to party, by the way. And so what happens is, Democrats were engaging quinceañera families and saying, look, if you bring all your family to sign up to vote and say that they will vote Democrat, we'll pay for the pictures or something. So, I think Democrats, now I don't like that because they're using the cultural, background of the Mexican American families to get into getting votes. And so it's almost like a quid pro quo, except for people will accept that. And say, I always see something like that, Joseph, and I think, is that something Republicans do or don't do well? I don't think we reach down into the cultures as much as we want. It's interesting to me because what you say is, I spent 20 years running back and forth into Colombia and Honduras, and you're exactly right. For them, it's a society by which the government must take care of them. Now, you and I know there's a lot of totalitarian dictators down there. Hugo Cesar Chavez, that guy, and of course, Colombia looked like it's turning socialist with their new president here about a year or so ago. Ecuador, Rafael Correa was give everything to the underlings or the subclass or whatever you want to call it. But even in Bolivia, I remember the guy. He was an indigenous president, and the way he won is he provided everything to the lower class indigenous folks, and they came out in numbers to vote for him. But let's come back here to the states, and again, is that something you see that we're breaking now? I always tell folks, look, the not the wokeism, but the awakening of the folks that typically vote Democrat. And for anybody who just started listening, we're having this conversation about why Hispanics vote Democrat. But I always say, Joseph, look, Hispanics never really see themselves, I think, as Hispanics. They think they know we're all Americans, we're all Texans, but there is this cultural thing we can't break through, and that is that they continue to vote Democrat year or election after election.
I think what's about a lot of change also has been the social issues. The social issues where the Democrat Party has gone pretty much far left. And by that, I refer to Hispanics are traditionally conservative, conservative in their value. They're pro God, pro life, pro traditional marriage. And those things had always really never been attacked to the point where they're being attacked now. So now, it's like I've always said it, and in some presentations, it's, can you imagine a traditional Hispanic family having a second or third grader come home and tell their parents, my teacher says I don't have to keep my gender. If they're a boy, I could be a girl. Can you
Yeah.
imagine those kinds of things? How would that fall in with a traditional Hispanic family? The same thing with a lot of other things. So for a long time, I think Hispanics were not paying too much attention because they were very comfortable just, living their lives, raising their families, because this is an area that had not been touched. There was a lot of indoctrination going on, but it was kind of like just, the left always has this sense where at the beginning, when they're the minority, they always say, we need equal representation. And once you let them in, they want to take over and kick everybody out, which is what they're doing right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
So what's happening, they're seeing that even with the Hispanics are seeing that, so Hispanics are understanding. They're like, what do you mean? What's going on? They're seeing things in school. Their children are coming and telling them that, all the drag shows, for the
Yeah.
little kids, so these are things that are not sitting well with them. So now a lot of them are opening their eyes. I also think that a lot of us, we could do a better job of, there's two things that I do in all my trainings and all my presentations. I always talk about, we have to expose and educate. That's something that I see a lot of times us as Republicans, when we're attacked by the Democrats or wokeism, we always
Yep.
defend the attack when what we're being attacked with, and that's a huge mistake, because when we attack a false narrative, we legitimize it. So we have to expose that, we understand, but a lot of people don't understand that it's part of the game. Most of the 99% of the time, when a Democrat calls you a racist, he or she knows that you're not a racist, but he or she has been told, if you call a Republican a racist, they're going to be quiet and they're going to pretty much do what you want them to do. So there's a lot of like tactics that they've been taught that
Yeah.
we, I think, could do a better job at responding to as well.
Well, and I give a lot of, I always tend to catch myself giving a lot of credit to a guy like Trump because, one of the things that I always proclaim, and that is, until a guy like Trump, we've never had a Republican to call out Democrats for exactly the very things that you're talking about, because he came down the escalator back in 2015, decided he was going to run for president, and once he became president, he wasn't shy about taking on this crazy wokeism that is plaguing not just our schools but society. And then you look at something that just sort of, I mean, they destroyed a lot of property, and nobody was held accountable for that. But it's interesting that you say, because I was just thinking of some of my of my parents, and even my friends' parents. This, even in San Jose, California, if somebody were to roll in and say exactly that, and look at their dad in the Hispanic family and say, I think, and it's a boy, says, I think I'm a girl. I'm not sure that the house would be turned upside down. Now let me segue for all my other wonderful Anglo Black American friends. I'm sure that if that happened in that culture, but we're having a conversation about Hispanics because it's a very machismo. Am I going too far when I say that, Joseph? It's a very man centric, very head of household
I would call it
culture.
more traditional.
Okay,
I
and
would
and,
call
and
it
I
more
can I can
tradition
go with
because even
that.
with the traditional mother, a female household too as well. I think even
Yeah,
that will not sit well with them as well. But just part of the culture, that's very conservative, very traditional, very family value oriented.
yeah.
So that's what I would refer to.
I like that, and I say that for my other manly men friends that in the Hispanic culture really is, and of course they very the preponderance of Hispanics. Not everybody. I'm not painting with a wide brush here, but are of the Catholic faith, right, Joseph? I mean, traditionally, I think, especially in Texas, a lot of Hispanic families are traditionally Catholic, which is another very, staunchly Christian faith. And so some of these things, they run deep. And they run for a very long time historical. The Catholic Church has been traditionally usually the centerpiece of a lot of these small pueblos, pueblitos, ciudades across, which is our small towns and cities in Texas, correlated all the way back to Mexico in the older days. But
Right.
that has a lot to do with it as well. I've got to believe that, right?
Exactly. Now, Raul, that shows you how good of a job the Democrats have done to get a whole pretty much group of people, Hispanics, that are so pro-Christian, have all these religious values, but yet they've actually persuaded them to put aside their values and vote emotionally for the party that represents everything against their traditional Christian
Yeah,
values. So that's how good the Democrats are. That's why we always say we have to prepare much better than they do, because they took this pretty much culture and told them, put aside your values, put aside your belief in God or your values that you have in family, and vote for us. So that just goes to show that they're very good at manipulating a lot of the conversation, the rhetoric, and pretty much getting them to use what I always call emotion. And that's
yeah,
what I always talk about in my trainings, that the part of the brain that interprets emotion is called the limbic system. And the reason, I'll tell you in a minute why I go to this. The limbic system is a part that interprets emotion and also causes you to have a reaction with a certain behavior.
okay,
So every argument that the Democrats impose is always based on an emotion, because they know that they could catch your attention and they're going to
yeah,
actually want you to take action. So that's part of their game. But they've been doing it for so long that a lot of people don't even see it anymore. Now, with that, I'd like to tell you something how I got started to show you how I got
yeah.
involved with
Please
this.
do give us a little background.
Well, I started studying human behavior at a very young age. I started reading books on human behavior like when I was like 6 or 7, because I was intrigued how the different cultures respond differently, the different demographics, male, female, different races, education levels. So I started studying a lot about that. So when I was 18, there was a person that was running for Senate, because I was city executive secretary. I was a young city executive secretary in a city here in Texas, and he was talking about how he's having trouble in a certain area. He was a Democrat. Back in the day, I didn't know too much different about Democrat or Republican. He
Yeah,
says it's a very conservative area. I said, and I happened over here, and I said, well, it's very easy to understand each of the cultures. Everybody has a certain way of responding. If you know what culture they are, the demographics, I could tell you pretty much what to tell each culture. They're going to know. And he was very intrigued. I never heard something like that. He ends up hiring me. I ended up going to Austin, 18
Right.
years old. I had no idea. But when they told me they wanted me to help them, you're naive. You think
Yeah.
we're saving the world. So when I got there, there's a lobbyist. The irony, there's three Republicans and two Democrats, and they're all going to be trained by me about this human behavior used in politics. So the lobbyist, he did me a great favor because he was very blunt in what it was. So I think he saw me very excited, and he says, "Let me tell you why you're here, Joseph. You are here to tell these people what to tell their constituents. When you look at all the demographics of their districts, what you need to tell them, what they need to tell each of them to win." He says they're going to go into office. They're not going to vote the way they tell the people. And then we're going to hire you again, and you're going to come and tell them what to tell those same people to reelect them, despite them not voting the way they told their constituents. So I was a bit confused. He says, that's what it is. And he also said, let me tell you what politics is. Politics isn't about what's right or wrong. He said, politics is about who gets to spend your money and on what.
Wow.
And that like stuck with me. I was like, so I look back and I'm kind of like glad because it kind of like opened my eyes to so many things that I see nowadays that I don't have to ask myself why,
Yeah.
because I mean, it's really in large part with a lot of people, that's really the way it is.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, and that's not a surprise. I mean, I guess I was up to 2016. I was military, so, and when we met, I could say I knew what we wanted to do, where we wanted to go, and but both parties, the Democrat and the Republican, they got to control who comes into to spend their money and for what, and this because we've had this conversation about you know uh, Democrats are horrible. I always say that. I mean, we're in a world today that does looks like a 180 to where we were a roaring economy, safe borders. No, we're not fighting with anybody. China is in check. Taiwan seemed to be safe 2 3 years back. Russia was at least in check. So was South or North Korea, and everything is a wreck right now. And but like everything else, I'm waiting for Republicans, and if we win the the House in November, which we're going to discuss here in a little bit, what exactly is Kevin McCarthy, if he's reelected the Speaker of the House, what's he going to do? Because I contend that that if a slew of people come over and vote, because Democrats are bad and we need the Republican Party to win it outright everywhere, are they going to do what they say they're going to do, or are we going to be back to the Paul Ryan days? Because here's the thing: when I think about Hispanics, and I had this show last week with Bianca Gracia, and the week before, I see this gaslighting of the Hispanic population that says, "Come on over." Under President Trump, I would agree that Hispanics were coming over in droves because, and you said it earlier, he's a fighter. He was providing a solution to all those things that plague us, especially down here on the border. We do not want open borders. It was understood for 20, 40 years that illegal alien activity always happened on this border, but now it's just an invasion. That's all there is to it. And so I think you're right. The populace down here is seeing that, and they're going to react, I think, in November. How much of that do you think is going to be the Hispanics coming over to help Republicans to win it outright? Because I've said this before, without Trump, I think Hispanics can see that there's not that catalyst for getting things done. So there's already this trust from generation to generation, and maybe it's culture because they need a reason to vote not Democrat. You see, that's what I say. In 2016, they weren't so convinced, but in 2020, we know that the Hispanic population largely voted for Donald J. Trump. He's not around in 22. What are your thoughts? I know you and I want to talk the Joseph. By the way, let me put this up here real quick. He's got this idea that it's called the Quigley's plot, and I'm going to leave it up there for a little bit. But first, the question: in 2022, is there enough of energy from when Trump was there for South Texas or all Hispanics to come over to the Republican Party and vote for them? I think it fizzes out, especially if you got someone like Kevin McCarthy. And by the way, I've been pretty blunt about not being a fan of Kevin McCarthy because I think he's a rhino. and he's not going to do a whole lot for us if we give him the House. Now that said, I'm hopeful that he does. I really am. But I think other Hispanics see that, and maybe the energy fizzes out. What are your thoughts? And then let's talk about Quigley's plot here. I'm going to put it away for a second, but
Sure.
what are your thoughts about 22? Is the Trump energy going to follow through in 22? We're going to clear the decks. What are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, I think you do have a point because if you remember, when Trump was president, we had the House and we had the Senate.
Yeah,
Okay. And the wall never got built. And that's
yeah,
because a lot of people that did not agree with the Republican platform were left in place in office. So I could see what you're saying. However, there's 5 levels of political engagement. And I think you have that file that I
yeah.
provided
Let
in
me
my
put it up
training.
there real quick.
And the reason I believe that Hispanics will still show up in droves in November is because in the first 3 levels, number one was it's a trigger action. That's when you first realize that you have to get involved. That could be something, probably a negative experience with something political. It could either be maybe your taxes or inflation that's going on right now. Number two is engagement, but they start seeking knowledge. They start seeking to be informed. Number three is involvement. That's when you start seeking the political peers, you start seeking the Republican clubs. The number three is the most dangerous level because a lot of people, number one, they get stuck there. And then if they don't see any change, and that's when they get pretty much frustrated and just leave. But I think the majority of people that are getting involved, Hispanics, they're in the first 3 levels, which means that a lot of them have still not done their research as to how everybody is voting. Now, when you get to level 4 and level 5, that's when you actually start being knowledgeable as to the voting record of all these people, why they're voting this way, what the plan is, who they're in pretty much in doing all these deals with, behind closed doors. That's a different level that I don't think the majority, and even a lot of people that have been in politics for 20, 30 years have encountered are still pretty much in level number 3. They haven't reached that point. And you probably talk to people when they tell you, what do you think of John Doe or Jane Doe? And ask them, well, did you know that John Doe or Jane Doe voted this way on this issue? And they have
I
no
run into
earthly
I
idea.
run into that in this district all the time for a lot of my good friends who know me. I'm political, and they go, I think I'm going to vote for Tony Gonzalez. Until I go, really? I mean, and I know he's a Republican, but he's about as Democrat, and even so on Democrats as well. We've got a lot of Democrats running for reelection. But you're right. I would put us in what, 4 and 5, because you and I are pretty political, I guess.
Yeah, once you start getting more involved, number 5 is a level that you understand why things happen. Now, number 5 goes into what I call Quigley's plot. Now, Quigley, it was Dr. Carroll Quigley. He was a leftist. He was a professor at Georgetown. He was also a member of the Council of Foreign Relations. And if the audience doesn't know who the Council of Foreign Relations is, they should look it up. The Council of Foreign Relations is actually the arm of the United Nations here in the United States. Because a lot of people don't know how so many things, even that are happening in your cities, they trickle down from the United Nations, even with your mayors associations. A lot of the sustainability and climate policies, they come from the United Nations. And the
Yeah.
armed forces that is a Council on Foreign Relations here in the United States. So what Dr. Carol Quigley wrote, he's got a book called Tragedy and Hope. Okay, now a lot of people call him an extremist or conspiracy theorist, but he wasn't, because they're trying to pretty much just hide what he said. Actually, Bill Clinton mentioned him in one of his speeches at the DNC convention. So what he said, and pretty much just summarizing, is that once politicians, whether they're Republican or Democrat, once they reach a certain level in power, they come for them. And they're told, okay, yes, you're a Democrat, you're Republican, but you have to vote for the globalist agenda.
So it's
And
the
if you
pressure.
don't,
It's
we'll
it's
get
it's
rid of you.
pressure. It's the pressure, is what you're saying. There's
Well,
this.
it's a pressure because they're told, it's either you vote with a globalist agenda or we don't put you on any committees. You have no money, and we'll even finance somebody to run against you and heavily fund them so they can run against you. Now, this is something that Dr. Carol Quigley wrote about. He talked about that, but he said that most people are not going to be intelligent enough to see it. So, once you study these people, they tell you what they're going to do. So I always tell people who go to my trainings or my training academies, I tell them, when you get out of this class, you should not be asking yourself, number one, why people vote the way they vote. And you should not be asking yourself also, like, why the media doesn't report everything, because everything is very clear, and we have to understand why they do it. And I think, and these articles, you could read them on keeptexasred.org. You could read my articles. I have this one in Quigley's Plot. They have several one that talk about why the border is not going to be fixed. Why the border crisis is going on. It's a multi-tiered organization, crime organization. That's really what it is. A lot of
Yeah.
people looking the other way, everybody pointing the other way. But this is something that's not new. When I was 18 years old, so a while back, one of the things that they told me that was never going to get fixed was the border, because everybody makes money off the border.
Yeah.
Both parties are making a lot of money, so it's very easy to look the other way or blame other people. But understanding why this happens, I think it brings a lot of more clarity into understanding the politicians.
No, and that's a good foundation, folks. And this is why I wanted Joseph to come on here because, as you can see, he's well studied in on human behavior, and a lot of this, I wish Joseph that the Republican Party would, uh, you know, counter the Democrat tactic that you were talking about earlier, because they've really become good at. I personally think they've ruined, the Black American family over years and years of just subsistence and all this other stuff. Their single parent rate is through the roof. It's terrible, and we seem, I say we, the Hispanic population, we seem to be the next target, and because and I think, but they're losing their grasp, because I just earlier I gave a poll, and it's on averages, something like 72-75% Hispanics typically vote Democrat, but that's not the number. I think that's a great progress. We're down to 52%. I don't think it's good enough to say we're going to have a landslide in Texas, in South Texas. I could be wrong. And as I speak, the update on, like for instance, the Myra Flores election, the word is the DNC has completely pulled all its money out, knowing that she's within 4 points and looking like she's going to win. Monica de la Cruz is the other one. Looks like because it's a new district, so she may win it outright as well. But when you're still sitting at 52% of Hispanics are favor Congress under Democrat control, I think the progress is fantastic. My take is, was that a Trump energy that we're seeing? Because I think if you look at your chart, and we're looking at the awareness, number one, everybody woke up or awakened to the Democrat tactics in the Hispanic, uh, community, and that's why they moved over. But the same people that are awake to Democrat tactics are going to be awake to a Republican who says one thing and then goes to Congress and does something else. Because
Yes.
this is why I think the rhinos in along the border are in trouble, Joseph. Because uh, I think most Americans post Trump, or Texans, are pretty sick and tired of Republicans who say one thing and go do something else. Now, I'm the guy. Now, folks, I've invited the guy that started Keep Texas Red. You know what I mean? So we believe in conservative values, but I think that it's a no holds barred with people who are new to the Republican Party. When they wake up to part number one and realize Republicans aren't going to do what they say they're going to do, I think we have an opportunity to ensure that we have the right conservative, the right Republican in Congress at the state level. I know when I ran for the state Senate, that was my biggest beef, is that we keep electing folks to let the legislative body, and then they turn around and do something else, you see. And real conservatives are left without, and you know this because we have priorities of the Republican Party. We fight tooth and nail every year to get 1 out of 8 or 10. And so, again, using your chart, you're right. We're awake. We're leaving the Democrat Party, but they could also awaken to a Republican Party who doesn't do or hold to its Republican planks. What are your thoughts on that?
I completely agree with that. And that's why I say once you leave level number 3, it's the most dangerous one. Because if you realize what happens, then you are going to be disappointed. Now, that's what happened in Mexico. If you remember, for years, the PRI, or El PRI,
El PRI.
They held office. They were supposed to be very conservative. They were supposed to be the party that was going to help the people, help Mexico kind of like advance economically and everything educationally.
Yeah,
And then you had the PAN, the PAN, that said, no, we're the right solution. And all these other leftist parties had no chance because you had the PRI, the PAN. So after so many years of the PRI, then they let the PAN take over. You remember Vicente Fox, and
yeah.
then
It was for folks who don't know historically, the PRI always won, and all of a sudden, Vicente Fox under the PAN party, PAN, wins. Go ahead.
right? And then you had him too. So then some people realize, and this is what I'm saying that's a dangerous level. People realize that the PRI and the PAN were colluding with each other and working with each other against the people. So
A
what was the result?
uniparty. Imagine that, a uniparty.
Right. So they started.
Yeah,
What happened? The people went far left with Morena, which is Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador, the current
AMLO,
president of
otherwise
Mexico.
known as AMLO. Yep.
AMLO, right now, AMLO, if you really research him, he really supports a lot of the Marxist
Yeah,
politics. He's a member, and you can read this also, and I have the research and all this stuff. This is not just stuff we're making up. We have the receipts, all the evidence of this. That he is a member of the Foro de Sao Paulo. This was started by Fidel Castro to promote leftism and Marxism and communism in Mexico, South America, and in the Caribbean, all those areas. So
yeah,
AMLO is a member of that organization, which is why previously, if you remember, he didn't want to come to the Summit of the Americas to Los Angeles because he said you didn't invite the dictators from Venezuela, Cuba,
yeah.
Nicaragua. So that's the danger that we also face here. That's why it's imperative that we select our people properly, to run as Republicans, because if Hispanics see that, some of the people that were electing are doing the same thing as the Democrats, are going to get discouraged, and then pretty much both parties are going to lose them. And it's very easy for some kind of like the Democrat socialists to come in and present themselves as a salvation to everybody.
Yeah.
And then the same thing that happened to Mexico can happen here in the United States.
Well, and this is again, I always say BT, before Trump, you could buy enough ads, you could buy enough. Because look, you and I agree that on November 8th, election night, as is every election, November 3rd, usually, right? You have this group of people that they see everything that's happening. They're busy with their lives. I'm not shutting down on them. What I'm saying is these are good Americans that they do their duty on November the 8th to go vote. They probably didn't vote in the March primary, so they haven't really researched. And they look at all the advertisement, and all they know is that they've had enough of the Democrats, and they go vote straight Republican, which is typically sometimes that happens a lot of times. And but you catch a hold of a lot of Republicans that probably don't need to be in office now in the primaries where we need to weed out these folks. I would agree with that, uh, but post Trump or PT, right? I contend very harshly that there are so many people awake to the horribles that is the Democrat Party, and they're moving over. But there are also a lot of the Republican base that are really disheartened with the Republican Party. And again, I always go back to folks. I always go back to John Cornyn being booed. I don't know if you were there for
Yes.
like 12 minutes with the wife in hand, and because they've had enough of the fake Republicans. So I'm with you. I think it's a good thing that the that Hispanics are waking up to a horrible Democrat Party. I don't credit much to the Republican National Committee in DC. They've done nothing to convince anything other than uh, we had a Donald Trump that sort of provided the catalyst for that. Here in Texas, the RPT has, I remember Alan West doing all he could to read. He was always down in the valley. Matt Rinaldi is trying to do a lot of stuff as well. I'm not sure about the guy before. I was still in the Air Force when I came in, so I'm not trying to discredit him at all. What I'm saying is I know that the Republican Party of Texas has tried to reach out, except for some of our elected Republicans really haven't held true to the Republican planks. I think that's what the problem is here. And if we miss an opportunity to do what we say we're going to do as Republicans, I think it's a backlash, and it's a severe one because then we won't recover for generations because they're just going to go back to traditions, and you can almost hear this at the Sunday mornings breakfast after church, eating pozol or menudo or eating tortillas. Grandparents telling their kids, "I told you, don't trust Republicans." What are your thoughts?
Yes, that's definitely something that can happen. Now, what I think though is that we need to do a better job, like in the pretty much in the primaries. If you pull up my chart, that could be a key, because one of my also in my training, one of the things that I always teach is that for you have to know your audience to prepare your message.
Yep.
You have to prepare your message so your audience will understand it. That means when we are targeting during the primary, if we know where exactly in each level our audience is at, which would be in this case Republican voters, then we know how to prepare a message. And I always talk to that about, because if you come in and you say John Doe is bad, you got to understand that a lot of people don't know that John Doe is bad. They have no idea the
Yeah.
policies that he or she has voted on, and we have to educate on that first. So there's a lot of work to do in the primaries. That's a lot of people that you know are not probably as conservative, or some of them don't even support the Republican platform getting elected,
Yeah.
because like I said, if the majority of the voters are going to be in the first three levels, that's your audience right there. So these
Yeah.
people are not even informed as to the voting records of these people. So I think we need to.
Well, let me insert this because and I don't know that it's cultural because I've ran two campaigns and look, there's people listening to who have heard me before. I can be pretty bombastic as a campaigner because uh, what I realized real quickly when I first ran my first campaign is that if you do it cookie cutter, and at that point it was Will Hurd, you know, he was still in part of CD 23, to go in there and play good Republican, he was just going to clean my clock because he had all the money. And by the way, I didn't jump in against Will Hurd because I hated the man or anything. It's just his policies were terrible, and we pointed those out. And you would always have some other Republicans, and looking back, I'm thinking, well, maybe they were fake Republicans or they're insurgents. They would look at me and go, Raul, you're being negative. And I'm like, okay, exposing the guy for his voting record is negative. I mean, what are the rules here? And now fast forward to Tony Gonzalez. I mean, we gutted that. We exposed him for the LULAC guy he was. Now, for everybody, I'm not having a therapy session here. What I'm saying to you is, as a Hispanic, you know, and I'll tell you, I run a little machismo. Maybe I don't know. I'm Joseph may not like that, but but I'm pretty head of household. I mean, the bottom line is I didn't come here to mince words, and I hate the hypocrisy of politics. So this is why I also started this podcast because I want to get to the gut truth of why it is we keep letting Republicans that don't serve us well. And look, it's not just Tony Gonzalez. You got to look at Liz Cheney. You look at all these other folks. I'm wondering, and maybe this is for a later topic, from a cultural perspective, is a guy like me not fit the Republican campaigning procedure? Because I'm just going to tell you like it is. I don't have time to miss words. Uh, but you know, Donald Trump did that too, and I guess he had a little more Sagwa fare or something. And of course, then I ran against a guy like Pete Flores. It never was personal, Joseph. What it was is I just thought he was weak on the border, and we're not going to get a whole lot out of that. I mean, and a lot of other Republicans, again, not bashing Pete. I think we need to get him elected. He's going to be fine. We're going to apply the pressure at the Senate to make sure things happen, but you know, what are your thoughts? Because I think a lot of times Hispanics sometimes don't jump in because people would say, well, you're not going to be a good campaigner. I'm like, go at it, have at it. At some point, we all agree we're all Americans. From a cultural perspective, look, the guy from New York, the most orange guy in the world, is the most loved now by the base because he called it like it was. And but sometimes when I did that, it wasn't the same. Maybe it was just a finesse thing. I don't know. What are your thoughts on? Is do we fit the cultural campaigning process? I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think first of all, we need to recognize, Raul, that right now we're in a very emotionally sickly society.
Yeah.
We pretty much embrace anybody who kindly smiles while they lie to us, and we really despise anybody that yells the truth. That is part that has been done by the indoctrination in public schools. That is something that has been done to society. In my training, I talk about cultural hegemony, which how they've changed all the narrative to what is normal in society. So that's a type of mentality they've created. So they created these people that they know that have been brainwashed to think this way emotionally, and so that's what they're used to. And if somebody
Yeah.
speaks the truth, they don't like that. And I think George Orwell said the same thing. In a time of deceit, anybody who speaks the truth, it's like a revolutionary act.
Yeah.
So you have to understand. So with that, I can say it's not that you don't fit. It's just that you have to understand your audience. This is an audience that has already been indoctrinated to think a certain way. They don't think critical, they think emotionally.
Yeah.
So bad Raul for saying that John Doe is bad. You're the bad guy because even if you're speaking truth, the truth is pretty much blocked out because you're stuck with the emotional part. So that's kind of like more what is going on right now. But that has a lot to do with what's going on in our education system. And
Yeah.
that's something also that we need to look at because uh, the way that the neuroplasticity of the brain, which means the adaptation, how the brain learns, how the brain changes, that is what's being used right now to indoctrinate our children. So what is normal to them, even of their sex or gender, they're using the neuroplasticity, which really means to just how you connect the dots to reach a certain conclusion.
Yeah.
So they're telling them they're kind of restructuring how they connect the dots to
Well,
think
I can tell
way.
you, I'm thinking of another guy that, and I'm batting 1,000 on examples here until somebody else proves me otherwise. But have you heard Frank Lopez? That guy's terrific, man. He's very articulate, the most conservative guy. I mean, former GOP, former SREC, and this goes back to what you said earlier. Not that we're equating him to an AMLO or something else. What I'm saying is the process by which two parties failed people in some place like Mexico, like you said earlier. I'm starting to see that here because the base of the Republican Party, now we're getting away from the Hispanic conversation, that's fine, um, is getting very upset with its political elected officials. And if they don't start to just beyond throwing crumbs at us, because I think when we passed constitutional carry, we could have done everything else. We got a trigger bill during that year, I think. Why would we have a trigger bill for abortion if we are run by Republicans? Now, as an aside, I don't think they realized that the the SCOTUS was going to go ahead and just overturn Roe versus Wade. So I think there's a lot of people scrambling. In fact, Karl Rove a week or two ago is calling the Texas law for abortion extreme, and that guy is supposed to be a hardcore conservative. So as a Hispanic, when I see Karl Rove, somebody I was listening to and paying attention to, and last week I put a picture up of George Will. Remember that guy, Mr. Conservative
Mhm.
as well, and a few other folks. I feel misled, and because theirs is more of a globalistic business, uh, you know, uh, ideology, and what it has is rendered. Joseph, I always tell people, I can't get a damn Ford pickup truck because the chips are made somewhere else right now, and you start looking for some of the supplies that make our things run, and they're made somewhere else. I get really upset about that because that's globalist ideologies that have led America into the pit hole, and we've become a used car sales America because you got to go find a very cheap and they're expensive now used cars because somebody holds the keys to that technology. We've allowed that to happen. So now back to the conversation at hand. I think when I look at someone like Frank, myself, and even someone like I had last week, Bianca Gracia, people say she's a bomb thrower, but she's a truth teller. And I'm not advocating for or defending any or whatever she might be saying on different aspects. What I'm saying is when we get past this level here, because you provide an excellent chart, when we get past the commit, we get all the way to the commitment, because that's Raul Reyes right there. I'm committed to ensuring that the gaslighting of Hispanics doesn't happen to the point that we're being used just for elections to turn around and do absolutely nothing for the border. Because we're all going to be looking, Joseph, is if Kevin McCarthy gets granted Speaker of the House, we expect him to do everything, stop funding the government until they allow Border Patrol, DHS to do their jobs. And the first thing they got to do is impeach Biden and impeach Mayorkas and all those other folks because, and I know you live in San Angelo and have been you're well traveled in Texas, so South Texas is in bad shape. Even a place like San Angelo, which is about 150 miles north of Del Rio, you guys are starting to see issues there, and fentanyl is coming across the border like crazy. Um, That's really the for me, that's the at the heart of it, but there's so many angles here. I've gotta tell you that, bringing you on board and that chart really helps because sometimes we don't put some human psychology behind it, and I know that Democrats do. You made a great point earlier. They've been at it for a long time. I guess what we were asleep at the wheel. I mean, Republicans just. I know it's made up of good, godly planks and Christians, but did we just fall asleep 20, 30 years ago, or we listened to a guy like Karl Rove, or what was our problem? Why are we here, and we can't do battle with Democrats like we want to?
I think what it was that we never anticipated, that they would start using the psychological uh, attack on Republicans. If they were hiring me when I was 18 years old, which was a while back, like 20 some years ago,
Yeah,
I know they have a lot of other people. I only did it for like 3, 4 years, but when I saw what they were doing with my knowledge, I left. But I know they have a lot of people doing this. I have yet to have seen somebody using this type of training on our side. That's why I had decided to step up and do it. What that means that we don't know how to push back.
yeah,
Somebody calls somebody any name. That's how they call, like, and if you read my book, The Democrat Modus Operandi, that's one of the first sentences. You call a Republican, a racist, a white supremacist, a homophobe, a xenophobe, whatever you want to call them, and you watch them a lot of times just squirm into Democrat compliance.
yeah,
But it's actually designed to do that. We don't know how to push back, but because we don't understand that it's part of the game that they use. It's part of, they have meetings and say, okay, we want to get rid of, let's say in this case, you, Raul, as a candidate. All you have to do is just, you're going to call him this and this. Now, I'm also a debate champ. So in debate, we use something that we call changing the frame. For example, let's say you're a Republican, Raul, and I'm the Democrat.
yeah,
We want to talk about border security. So you come to the table prepared with statistics, with facts, with all these numbers on child trafficking, on the fentanyl, all the drugs that are coming, all the taxpayers' money that's being lost with the bad border. I'm going to come to the table and I'm going to change the frame. Instead of me defending those policies, because Democrats can't defend their policies because they don't work. But
yeah.
so that's why, if you always notice, even on TV, when they start doing, they'll change the frame, which means I'm going to drag you from talking, or me having to defend those policies. I'm going to tell you, why are you a xenophobe and a racist? Why do you not want these people?
Yeah,
See, I'm
that
going
seems
to
to
take
be
you to
the
an
default
emotional right.
message. Yeah, that
And
seems
it's
to be the
called,
default message is you're gonna be a racist if you think one way or the other, and, that I think, you know, most, men and women are they function in the chivalry, protocol, where right is right and wrong is wrong, and we try not to be rude with, or insulting like that, but I guess Democrats have just taken their gloves off and because here's what I'll tell you, across America, some very low level attorney general. You look at Georgia, their AG out there, their state level AG is attacking Trump. Right down the road here in San Antonio, the very liberal sheriff, county sheriff, is attacking Trump. But I don't see anybody on the Republican side, you know, doing the same gouging on Joe Biden. Now, our AG Ken Paxton is out there flinging away, doing everything, and they can. But why isn't some AG up in Washington trying to tackle Joe Biden? And because Donald Trump, the most non-ideological person that I can think of, turns out to be the most conservative guy there was, just probably from his business acumen or something. But he's got at least 40 or 50 lawsuits from low-level underlings in the Democrat Party, but we don't seem to play that game. And it goes back to what you said earlier: is in the campaigning and everywhere else. I don't know that I don't buy into the notion we got to insult folks, but we have to expose things, and sometimes that comes across like a negativism. And again, part of why I started this podcast because I wanted to bring out different angles like this conversation we're having here because we're not going to get it right all the time, folks. But Joseph and I are trying to expound around things that would you agree, Joseph? Most people don't want to have this conversation, much less on video. Uh, because it's a little tough to look and call things the way they are. But luckily, you've got Joseph is well studied on human behavior. He's got 20 years of experience. He's wrote a book. What's the name of your book, real quick, before I let you go here soon?
the Democrat modus operandi.
And what does that tell? That tells you exactly what Democrats do, their tactics. It's all in this book. Is that right?
Yeah, not only their modus operandi is a word that I use to describe pretty much a criminal organization's tactics, you know. So what I describe is how
That's
they
what they
use
are.
emotion, negative branding, selective outrage, and language to manipulate a lot of their narrative. But
Yep.
I only just not expose that. I actually explain how to push back because that's something that I don't see a lot on our side. You know, even with a lot of high profile elected officials, you
Yeah.
know, I see them a lot of times. You know, they fall for the trap. You know, and on there I give you a lot of ideas, even how you should actually vet. You know, your from your local elected officials, from city council, county commissioners, all the offices. What are the questions to your sheriff, the most important person in your county? You know, what you're supposed to ask him, how are you supposed to ask him? Your school boards, what are you supposed to ask him? Because a lot of times they just say, "Hey, Raul, this is Jane Doe. You know, she's a considerate, so vote for her." Well, what do they think about woke ideology? Do they know the history of all these things? Do you know how our schools are being attacked? Like something that I don't know if you know, Raul, but did you know that sight words were actually created on purpose to keep students from learning critical thinking?
Yeah.
There's actually an attack on a lot of the phonics right now, but that was done by sight words, and it's actually there's research, and you could see where there's letters all over the United Nations where they plan these things. Do our school board candidates know these things? This
Yeah.
is something I always advocate for. They have to be informed in whatever office they're going to go into.
Well, and that's the that's part about being a voter, right? Is and your chart shows that there a lot of people are aware, but sometimes never get past the research piece, which is really vital. And that can be frustrating, not just from a campaign, a candidate perspective, but even from just, from being I guess if we pundits for a second, where we're watching what is happening across the board. For me, it's always vital that, uh, you know, I really hold people to their words. If you said you're going to do something, you got to go do it. And this is why I like the guy like Donald J. Trump, and I think a lot of folks are holding a lot of politicians to that level of accountability, because it can be done. The border can be secured. You can have a roaring economy. You can call out people both on the Democrat side and even in your own party, because I'm a critique of a lot of folks in even our own party. If you're sitting on your hands and aren't using every aspect to take care of your constituency. But Joseph, we're getting close on time here. Give me the quick rundown. Give me your website, and where can people reach you if they wanted to get a hold of you or learn more about some of these things that we've been talking about.
The website they can go to is keeptexasred.org, and you can read a lot of my information, a lot of my articles that I've written. My articles are written from a very different approach. It's a lot of time from the psychological, because I've done a lot of studies in human behavior and philosophy, and then media and marketing. So it's a different approach. So I talk about my articles on the border, why I think it hasn't been solved, why more than likely will not be solved for a very long time. Um, and you can go to keeptexasred.org, and you can get a copy of my book as well on there.
Excellent. Well, listen, thanks for being here with us, hanging out. We'll have to do it again. Let's do maybe our offside Tuesdays. Maybe we'll do a right before election night on November the 8th. Maybe we come back on Sunday or Monday. Think about that as we're going to let you go so we can end this here in a little bit. But once again, Joseph Vargas doing great work, providing some different insight to some of the things that we're talking about here. Today's topic was, why do Hispanics keep voting Democrats, and are they actually going to do it again in November? Two different approaches. I think the end result is we're all going to find out here November the 9th, right? So, listen, God bless you. Thanks for being here with me, and we'll talk offline later, okay?
Thank you, Raul.
Thank you. All right, folks. There you have it. Joseph Vargas trying to help us answer, what's going to happen in November with the Hispanic population. Is, by the way, and I need to check on this, but it is now the largest minority population in Texas. I think it was trending like that for 20 years. I think we hit that this year, and so the answer is here is for me is I think the Republican Party is a home for all conservatives. And today's conversation was about Hispanics. And the reason I did this is because, you keep hearing our elected Republicans and saying, they're Hispanics are coming in South Texas. And that seems to be true. Today's update was that the DNC has pulled out of the Mayra Flores campaign against Vicente Gonzalez. I think it's her opponent. That doesn't mean she's going to win. It just means they pulled the money out to go do battles somewhere else. Leave no room for doubt. I think they're going to get crushed. But is it 2010 crush when the Tea Party came out in droves and something like 65 seats exchanged from Democrat to Republican? I don't think so. The polls aren't showing that. We may be 10, 15 seats ahead, if that. And so I say that the reason is that there's no energy to get out and vote. And even with as bad as Democrats are, we have a few Republicans that really do not. They're not Trumps. They're not fighters. People don't see them that way. Now, on the other side of that is um, this is 2022. There's no presidential election. About the hottest ticket that we have is right there with Beto O'Rourke and Greg Abbott. And even then, I've always said, the Democrat Party is really just sinking it, because how do they get someone like so antagonistic like Beto O'Rourke to run against Abbott? Now, I'm not giving them any pointers. The answer is you probably dislike Beto more than you dislike if you're non-political or you don't know anything, and you're going to go vote for the Republicans. Well, great. We need Abbott to get on and move on to be the governor, and we'll go from there. But some of the other races out there that prove my point are someone like if you've listened to JD Vance and Tim Ryan. They had a debate here a couple of days ago. JD Vance is the Republican running against Tim Ryan, the Democrat, and took him to town on that debate. But JD Tim Ryan is one of the worst Democrats you can have. If you look at even the Arizona Kari Lake um, governor's race, her opponent is so horrible she doesn't even want to debate. And if you look at the Pennsylvania, you all have heard of Fetterman. He's the guy that had the stroke. Uh, they're having to give him notes for him to even speak. Reminds you of Joe Biden, right? And I'm not making fun of the fact that he got a stroke. What I'm saying is they put up some of the worst candidates. And so, again, good for us. Everybody's like, bro, why are you complaining? I'm not. What I'm saying is this is how bad the Democrat Party is right now with the economy, the border, inflation. Looks like we're headed to a recession, brink on a nuclear war with Russia, even though it's a proxy war of sorts with Ukraine. The point here being we should be crushing it in the congressional races, and yet it looks like we're barely going to get the House. The Senate is in play, and you have to ask yourself, why is that? And if you listen to other pundits and other people talking, it's the same answer. Is we the Republicans tend to pull out defeat out of the jaws of victory. We do this to ourselves all the time, and we have to learn from these things and move forward and try to make it so that better candidates you know, uh, in the primary breakthrough. Because if we keep doing the same political tactic employ, again, getting back to the Hispanic conversation with Joseph earlier, we're gonna lose an opportunity to bring in what everybody agrees is a very conservative culture of Texans. They're Hispanics. Okay, great. But if we don't provide the right home, by the way, if you look at the Republican Party planks, all of them are godly, they're conservative. The problem is we have elected Republicans that don't hold true to that. Now, here's what I'm going to say before everybody says I'm bashing all the Republicans. A lot of wonderful Republicans out there. The problem is, I think, and I've said this in two campaigns before, there's an insurgency of people, liberals, leftists, that have figured out how to run in the Republican Party. A guy like me, when I run a campaign, I call them out. And you should expect that. Now, when one day I'll bring Joseph back up, and I'm sure he's listening. The question is was that just a cultural thing, or was I just being Raul Reyes? I want to say a jerk of sorts, but the point being is, was it my being, or was it my upbringing? What is it? And the answer is, I'm a Texan. I'm an American first, and I went in with we're gonna have to expose these people if the Republican Party is going to be the party for all Texans, all Americans, and because today's conversation was about Hispanics, for Hispanics, we're going to have to do a better job of providing a home of elected Republicans who will actually do what they say they're going to do. We're our 19th, 20th year of Republican leadership. And the base is awake, folks. I back to John Cornyn got booed in his home state at the state convention. Now, credit to John Cornyn. He actually hung in there and he finished the speech, which is you got it. He's got cojones. I can say that. Still don't like him politically. Didn't do anything for us. He's a globalist, but he was let known that at the state convention. All that said, the conversation continues. I'm going to keep providing these kinds of conversations, different angles about what's really happening and how do we solve this. Because at the end of the day, the reason I put this podcast together was to bring people on like Joseph, well known, studies the human behavior, cultural behavior, and he's been in the know for 20 plus years. He's also a consultant of sorts if you need one of those. All that to say that for us, we've learned a lot of things and we're just trying to provide that. That said, let me cap this off with, we've got to get out there and vote for all the right people, and ensure that Texas stays conservative and that we are a home where the borders are secure, our economy is roaring, and we actually have people who say one thing and will actually go do that for us. So with all that said, look, it's about 7 minutes past the hour. I do want to answer a question. Somebody asked, why did Biden listen to Tony Gonzalez when asked for flights from Laughlin, but refuses to listen to other Republicans? What's the difference between Tony G and a real conservative like Frank Lopez? That's a bona fide question. And so let me say this, and it goes to what we're talking about now. If you put up a guy like Tony Gonzalez and the RNC backed him fully against us in the primaries and even in the runoff in 2020, we could not scream it loud enough that they were getting it wrong. And the answer is, in this political business, some people don't care about your ideology. Some people will put up candidates to go to Congress or the state level to simply get the business that they want done. That's politics, folks. I'm not complaining. I'm just making sure everybody understands. Not everybody is out there to do good. Some of their in the state level to do their business, and they have to provide the money for candidates to get there. That's who Tony Gonzalez is. He's just a Democrat who's making a lot of money pretending to be a Republican. The reason Biden listens to that guy is because he kissed the ring and he bent the knee to Joe Biden. But if you had me up there, or maybe a guy like Frank Lopez, and this is why Frank is making a lot of noise for those who are in CD23. That guy's not going to bend the knee to anybody. Not liberals, not anything anti-God. I know the man, and so people are going to see that now because that question was thrown out there. I'm going to use that as just a short segue. Frank's race, Frank Lopez Jr. is running in CD23. There's a Democrat, John Lida, and a Republican incumbent, Tony Gonzalez. We're going to find out a lot in CD23. It might be a litmus test of how things go in the future. There's a lot of folks hoping he wins because then it puts rhinos back at bay. That means that there's an actual process to get rid of people, both in the Democrat and the Republican Party, as an independent run. But if you look at Frank, he is. I mean, he's talking Republican Party planks to the bone, and he's an ordained minister. Now it just sounds like we talked all things Frank Lopez here, but the same thing can be said in Arizona and in California and in Washington. There are people who are having to run outside the norm of the two parties because the two parties are not functioning for them anymore. And you heard Joseph earlier that we had the same situation in Mexico. We had two parties that, one was better. And at one point, they elected a president, Vicente Fox, under the Bond Party that said, we're going to get it done. And he did nothing. And this is how you get an AMLO, the current Marxist socialist president in Mexico, who I believe, and everybody knows, is in bed with the cartels, running fentanyl and helping with the invasion of America. All that said, um, we hear at the Raul Reyes Show. We're going to keep talking politics. Some of these conversations can be hard on some folks. It's not negative. We're just trying to expose. And I want to thank Joseph one more time for coming on board. He's a real smart man. If you need any information or want to look at his website, please go there as well. We'll put it in the comments section so you guys can see that. But with all that said, we're typically 10 minutes over the hour. I want to thank you all for listening. We're going to have an awesome guest next week. Alan West is going to be here with us. He's going to come talk to us. He says there's no holds barred. We can have a conversation about anything, as is the case with my show. You come on board, we can get to ask any question we want. So stay tuned next Tuesday, 8 o'clock for Alan West. We'll advertise that, but everybody push that out and let people know. We're going to have our good friend Alan West. We're trying to get Don Huffines out here as well, maybe Chad Prather. We'll invite Tony Gonzalez and anybody else, Abbott, anybody who wants to come on here and have a conversation with us. We really want to ask a lot of questions. So that said, happy Tuesday to all of you. Remember, we live in the greatest country in the world, and we are blessed to be in the greatest state in America, Texas. And so let's keep fighting for her. I know a lot of folks get a little weary and leery and tired, but don't give up. I haven't given up. We're going to keep talking. We're going to keep doing the things we need to do. We are growing a little bit of hair. If I ever chop it off, that means I'm going to go do another campaign somewhere. So as long as I've got hair, we're going to be here talking to you Tuesday, 8 o'clock. Please tune in. Great conversation with Alan West. One more time, Joseph was fantastic. If you're listening, buddy, thanks a lot for being on here. God bless you all. Have a great and wonderful evening. And let's keep fighting for the great state of Texas.